What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Dr. Joey Munoz Show, your go-to podcast for all things health and fitness. I'm your host, Dr. Joey, Nutrition Sciences Ph.D. and founder of Fit for Life Academy. Today's episode is a great conversation with my good friend, Dr. Sean Pastuch, who I actually met about 2 months ago in New York when I went to the Strong New York Expo to give a talk. We kicked it off really well, super nice guy, really knowledgeable as well, so I thought it would be awesome to have him on the podcast. Dr. Sean Pastuch is a chiropractor by training, and he's the owner of Active Life, which is a company that focuses on bridging the gap between healthcare and fitness. Really cool stuff, and it's something we'll talk about a ton in this episode. His company really focuses on helping people live a pain-free, active life without having to compromise the things that they love doing most. This was a fantastic conversation, jam-packed with super valuable information. I hope you guys enjoy it. Dr. Sean Pastuch, what motivated you to focus on bridging the gap between fitness and healthcare? And what does that look like in practice?
That's a good first question. What motivated me to do it, if I'm being radically honest, is it was how I built my personal training business from scratch to full-time in less than 6 weeks, several years prior. And it just seemed like the right audience to start helping now that I had experience and a track record and an education that I didn't have when I was doing it previously. So I'll explain kind of what I was doing, and that will answer your second question of what that looks like. I was working as a personal trainer at Equinox back in 2005. And for anyone who knows what it means to work at Equinox, it typically takes 6 months or so to become a full-time trainer, which is 21 sessions a week on the floor or more. That gets you off of floor shifts, which at the time were paid like $8 an hour. And they could be at 5:30 in the morning or 8 o'clock at night. Didn't matter. I did not want to be on the floor. And so what I found myself doing was working with the people who all of the other trainers would prefer to pretend didn't exist inside of the gym. So these are the people who were dealing with morbid obesity, the people who did have 1 to 2 or even 3 chronic diseases, comorbidities, and a physical ailment that was slowing them down. One of my clients had ALS, and he just wanted to train with dignity until he died. I had another client who had frozen shoulder, and the physical therapists couldn't solve for it, and she came to me to learn how to live with it. I had a client who was advising the president, at the time it was Bush, on drug policy. Or no, I take it back. That was the second time I was in the gym. He was advising Obama on healthcare policy. And he had previously advised Bush. And he was out of breath by the time he climbed to the second story of the gym. And most of the time, the way that you get to being full-time as a trainer is you work with attractive clients who other people want to look more like, or clients with status who other people want to be more like. You have charisma, and it's easy to acquire new clients. I didn't want to play that game. And so I found myself working with the people in the gym who the healthcare system had no answers for, and the fitness industry would prefer to pretend didn't exist. I would take them upstairs to the physical therapy suite, and I would say, what do I do with this person? I don't know what to do with them. They're hurting. Frozen shoulder. What do I do with that? And their answers were so uninspiring. It was stuff like, if it hurts, tell them to work around it. If it hurts, don't do it. This is what happens when you get to be that age. If these are the worst problems that this person has in their life, they're living a great life. And I was like, yeah, this is not what I want to do for the rest of my life. And so I ended up going to chiropractic school because I figured I would solve for that problem. It was so frustrating for me. And I came out of chiropractic school and realized I didn't really want to be a chiropractor either. I was tired of telling people I'm a chiropractor when they would say, what do you do? Like, I'm a chiropractor, but not like you're thinking. Because I wasn't adjusting everybody. It wasn't like, oh, I can crack your neck and solve all of your life's problems. That wasn't me. It never was. And so I found myself treating patients in such a way that was some personal trainer, some chiropractor, some life coach. All of those things were kind of mixed in at the same time. That led to elite athletes like CrossFit Games champions, Olympians, professional baseball players flying to my office to see me for care that they couldn't get local to them because I didn't fit as either a doctor or as a trainer. I filled the gap between. And that led to trainers wanting to learn what I was doing. And that led to where we are right now, which is having helped more than 10,000 people from around the world to get out of pain without going to the doctor or giving up their active life. And having developed close to 1,000 trainers in the last 3 years to create a career that is financially freeing, emotionally fulfilling, working with clients who they're inspired by on their own terms. And the gap between fitness and healthcare is larger. For anybody who's curious, it is larger than either fitness or healthcare. And so building a company that serves it was the obvious thing to do.
Yeah, that's super cool. And thank you for sharing all that info, Sean. I definitely learned a lot about you there. I'm definitely curious to dive a little bit more into your particular philosophies and modalities when you work with clients, but I think it's probably helpful for the listener because you talk a lot about this concept of bridging the gap between healthcare and fitness. What does that even mean?
So let me start here. There's a place where the healthcare system ends. And that place, when it comes to especially musculoskeletal healthcare, is when the patient can perform what's called their ADLs, their activities of daily living.
Mm-hmm.
There is a list of these. And they're things like washing yourself, being able to wipe your butt, being able to drive to work, being able to sleep through the night. When you are able to do these things, you are no longer insurance reimbursable as a patient for the doctor who is seeing you. Now, people might think, okay, well, what about a cash pay? Sure, they might be able to charge you cash, but what you need to understand is they didn't learn the things that they're doing to help you beyond those ADLs in the school that they went to get the career that they have, because the schools are influenced by what their students are going to be reimbursed for in practice. And so they're educated on what insurance will reimburse for. They're learning most of the rest of what they do, if they're a cash-based doc, from the fitness industry. And then they're applying their knowledge from one to the other and becoming some sort of a hybrid. If those docs called their malpractice insurance providers and asked them the questions that I called my malpractice insurance provider just to figure out how do I even bill for this at the time, because no one else was really doing it, they would find that helping somebody be able to do something like sprint without low back pain is not always covered by their malpractice insurance.
Sure.
Because it's not an ADL. But the trainer might be covered by that, provided that they don't diagnose by their professional practice's liability insurance. So what I did to figure out where is the gap is I had both insurances, and I called my malpractice provider. Where is the line? If I do X and someone gets hurt, I'm liable. I'm negligent. I'm outside of my scope. And then I called my professional practice's liability insurance and said, if I do X, where am I liable? That helped me very clearly understand the gap. And the way that I explain the gap to people in simple terms is what I call ADIs, activities of daily interest, are in the scope of the trainer, not of the doc. Activities of daily living, ADLs, are in the scope of the doc, not the trainer. So I can't wash my hair, doc. I get low back pain when I squat more than 200 pounds, trainer. Because that's actually a capacity issue, a low back issue, right? And the line becomes a little bit blurry when it's, well, where does this fit on this person's occupational athlete profile? But what I tell trainers all the time is, you are not licensed to diagnose. Never diagnose. You don't know what tissue it is. You don't know what's causing it. You don't have a disease state that you're going to name. You know what's long. You know what's short. You know what's strong. You know what's weak. You know where motor control is strong. You know where motor control is lacking. You know when recovery and work are out of alignment. You can optimize for those things. And oftentimes that's going to result in somebody feeling a lot better. That is the gap between fitness and healthcare. In the simplest of terms for the client out there who's listening. The person who tells you if it hurts, we can work around it is the trainer who is not bridging the gap between fitness and healthcare. And the doctor who tells you if it hurts, don't do it is not bridging the gap between fitness and healthcare. The person who understands that you don't want to have to modify it, that you don't want to work around it, and that you don't want to stop doing it, who has a solution so that you can get back to doing it. That is a person who is bridging the gap between fitness and healthcare.
Yeah, that's a very simple and succinct way to put it, right? Which makes perfect sense. If I could maybe just play a little devil's advocate here, do you think part of the issue, Sean, is perhaps the lack of standardization, education, regulation when it comes to personal trainers specifically?
Yeah, part of the problem is licensing and regulation and things like that. But at the other side, you kind of don't want the federal government or even a state government to tell you what you
Sure.
need, right? That you want to cause problems in something that's already working, give it to the government.
Sure.
So what I'm actually working on is having a team of really highly esteemed medical doctors, orthopedists, physical therapists, chiropractors who want to refer to trainers. I know
Okay.
exactly what they want because I've been talking to them for years, and we've built our curriculum, which is 13 months long for the core stuff and another year for the specialties, which is not like a weekend seminar,
Sure.
to be able to meet the needs that doctors want to see when they're referring a patient to a trainer. But what I'm working on now is language that makes it very clear so that the fitness industry can raise up to
Yeah.
meet the medical industry where it will always trust that the person they're referring to is referable so that we can say, look, this is the bar. We at Active Life are exceeding the bar. But if NASM wants to come meet it, if CrossFit wants to come meet it,
Yeah.
if I said, come meet it, we're not going to do this by ourselves.
Yeah. You know, the reason I asked that question, Sean, is because, well, similar to yourself, prior to starting graduate school or anything like that, I started as a personal trainer, right? And it was mainly because of my interest in fitness and I wanted to help other people. And I quickly realized how little knowledge personal trainers actually have, right? It's like you don't actually need to know much about fitness. You need to know how to sell. And that's, I don't know if it's like that today still, because it's been quite some time since I've been a personal trainer.
It is. Well,
But
the problem with that is you see personal trainers who will say things like, I've been doing this for 20 years. I was like, yeah, but you're not better today than you were 20 years ago, and you weren't good 20 years ago.
yeah.
Time under tension doesn't make you good unless you figure out what you were doing wrong on purpose and do it better.
Yeah.
And the personal training industry is rampant with people who just cite time as their value indicator. Or even worse, I've worked with personal trainers who I did not take on as clients who had walls behind them, like my wall behind me. I have my licenses for chiropractic and stuff like that somewhere. My degree from Maryland. I think they're in the attic in my house. I've had people who've inquired to work with us whose entire wall is full with certifications and frames. I'm like, that's mental illness. That's not excellence. Is that well?
Got
You have
mine
one.
right there.
I don't mind people having their certificate. When you have a wall full of like, I'm kettlebell certified, I'm kettlebell level 1 certified, I'm stretch therapy certified. I'm like, dude, when do you have time to work with clients?
Yeah. I agree with that. And you know, the other reason why I asked that question, Sean, is because whenever we have a discovery call with a potential client and we're talking about what we do, very often people say, well, I've worked with a personal trainer before and blah, blah, blah. And it's hard to get somebody to understand the difference between a personal trainer and what we do, because unless they really understand what the service is like, and if they actually have very little knowledge, it's difficult for them to discern the difference there. That's really where the question was coming from. If I could follow this up, and I think...
Can I help you with that?
Go ahead. Of course.
Can I help you with that? Because I'll help any trainer who wants to hear it with that.
Yeah.
I'll create my own competition. Even if you don't have the education necessary to be competent to compete, I'll provide it. I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about the market at large.
Sure.
Our tagline has been, get out of pain without going to the doctor, giving up your active life. But that's only because that's what people know that they want. That's not actually what we do. And what we do is we help people live without compromise, because people don't actually care that they're in pain, Joey. They care about the compromises that the pain forces them to make.
Sure.
And so if you're a trainer who works with people on weight loss, as a for example, They care less about actually losing weight and more about the life that they feel like they can't live until they do. Your job is not to help them lose the weight. It's to help them live the life. And as a result of working towards living the life, they will lose the weight. But there are people out there who help people lose the weight as well as you do. Trainer A, whoever you are, but who don't help that person live the life that they said they wanted to live as a result of losing the weight. And so to the client, it's not actually as beneficial as they thought it was going to be. The separator is helping them live the life. And so what I would suggest to you is when people say, I've worked with a personal trainer before, asking them, what did you work with a personal trainer for? What did you want? And they'll tell you, the regular things they know how to say. And then if you ask them, what would be different about your life if you achieved those things? What would you do that you're not doing now? They will tell you. And then you ask them, were you doing those things last time? Sometimes they'll say yes, sometimes they'll say no. Your response is the difference between us and regular trainers is that we are focused on that, the result, not the weight loss, the strength gain, which are tactics on the way to the result.
Yeah. That's a great way of putting it. And it's the truth, right? It is the truth. It is what is the biggest differentiator there. Since you were bringing up your company, Active Life, and what you guys do in helping clients live their life without compromise, can you maybe elaborate on a little bit on your particular approach with clients, why it's effective? How does it differentiate from traditional medical interventions as well?
Sure. So the first thing is we have to define compromise so that people know what we're talking about. The definition that we've assigned to the word compromise is the low energy way to resolve conflict incompletely. So you're spending less energy to solve something less completely, which means you're just kicking a can down the road.
Yeah.
And examples of that are things like giving up on the sports that you used to love playing because you're getting too old for them. Lifting less weight because every time you lift heavy weight, it hurts your back. Not getting on the ground to play with your young kids because it's painful or uncomfortable. Skipping on a certain vacation and going somewhere else because you're afraid you're going to be a burden on your family because you can't go on the hike. And lying to people, yourself, friends, family, loved ones, colleagues, because the truth is, in men's case, oftentimes emasculating, and in women's case, oftentimes feels burdensome. This is the difference between men and women sometimes, right? So we help people eliminate the compromise in their life. What makes us different than a traditional medical approach, for example, is a medical approach is attacking a diagnosis. You have a herniated disc at L5S1, or you, in my case, have a herniated disc in your cervical spine, Sean. What that means is we can do surgery to fix the disc. We can do a nerve block so you stop feeling shooting pain down your arms, and so you can sleep through the night. We can try physical therapy to get rid of the neck pain. Those are really your options. Okay. I did the physical therapy. I skipped the nerve block. I wasn't going to get the surgery. And I learned to live with it. Despite the fact that I owned a company that I knew could help me with it, nothing stuck. I was like, I have to really dedicate myself to this to solve the problem. The problem wasn't the neck pain. Again, the problem was the compromise. And I learned that one day when my daughter, who was 5 years old at the time, something that you will soon be dealing with yourself, asked me as we're walking home from a 4th of July block party, Daddy, can you put me on your shoulders? Can I sit on your shoulders?
Oh, man. Yeah.
And I said, no. And I said, no. And then I lied. I said, no, Daddy's tired. And for me, I don't like lying to my kids, right? Like I do it from time to time. Like Mommy and Daddy were just wrestling. You know what I mean? But but I'm never too tired for my kids. That's a rule that I have.
Yeah.
And so not only did I lie, I lied to the laziest example that my kids would believe.
Yeah.
That was intolerable to me. I wanted to be able to put my kid on my shoulders, and I never wanted to tell them I was too tired. I don't want them to grow up thinking Dad's too tired. It's okay for me to be too tired. So I hired Active Life to help me because now we had a really strong purpose. And the difference is nobody in our company was evaluating, do you have a herniated disc or not? I do. Who cares? Most people with disc herniations are asymptomatic.
Mm-hmm.
So I can't rest on that. So what can we do? And not ignoring, but like they knew it was there, but they ignored it it was constrained from being the answer.
Mm-hmm.
Right? They identified what was weak, what was strong, what was short, what was long, where was my motor control good, where was it bad, what kind of loading did I tolerate well, what kind of loading did I tolerate poorly, how was my stamina, what was my work recovery look like, what is my self-talk, what are my relationships, all of that. And they addressed it, and they held me accountable to the thing I said I wanted to be able to do, which was not get out of neck pain. It was carry my kids on my shoulders. So I have a very simple test that I can do anytime I want now. Can I pick my kids up on my shoulders and walk around town? The answer is yes. After
Yeah, I love
years
that.
of living with debilitating neck pain, I haven't had neck pain like that in 2 years.
Yeah.
I put my oldest daughter, who's 9, on my shoulders at an Islanders game 2 weeks ago. Got yelled at by security. I put my middle daughter, the one who was 5 at the time, 7 now, on my shoulders to put the Jewish star topper on the Christmas tree.
Cool.
I carry my littlest one around on my shoulders all the time. She loves it.
Yeah.
So the difference between us and the medical system is we're not diagnosing, we're not medicating, we're not giving shots, we're not giving surgery, and we're not doing therapeutic exercises. We're comprehensively changing the way that people live, train, think, socialize, so that they can have the life that they think that they would have if they didn't have their symptoms.
Yeah. And I'm happy that you brought up, we're not doing just therapeutic exercises. And I'm assuming that when you use the term therapeutic exercises, you're talking about very basic body weight type of movements that are common in like the physical therapy realm, correct?
Not necessarily. I think like those are examples of therapeutic exercises, like doing, these external shoulder rotations is a therapeutic exercise, but so is a back squat for somebody who has knee tendonitis.
Exactly.
So when I said we don't just do that, what I meant to say, what I meant for people to understand is that the workout program, that's entry level stuff. Who are your friends? Why? When is the last time you went on date night with your wife? Why? Those are things that people oftentimes don't think have a place and can't see the relevancy to getting out of neck pain. But the reality of all of it is nobody would flinch if we said something like, if you want to be a millionaire, make friends with 4 other millionaires and you'll become the 5th.
Sure.
So if you want to get out of neck pain, make friends with 4 people who would never say that's what happens when you get older. And it won't be what happens when you get older.
Yeah, I definitely want to talk about the mindset piece because I know that's something you're big on as well. Since we're on the topic, of people, I know you mentioned that pain is a symptom. It's not necessarily the main thing that people want to get out of. It's the compromise.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think it's important to talk about pain, Sean, because there's so much misconception around pain as well, right? For example, like people immediately think if they're experiencing some pain, they must have some sort of injury. Those two things don't correlate 100% either, right? To give you a little bit of background here, like I used to play so much basketball. I love basketball. I used to probably play 2 or 3 hours of basketball a day when I was in college. And I would play on concrete outdoors with shitty shoes. And I have extremely flat feet as well. And as a byproduct, I developed really bad knee pain. At 19, I used to not be able to sit in a car for more than 30 to 45 minutes without like shooting pain down my leg, sciatic pain, right? And thankfully, I've always been a relatively hard-headed person. And I've always been I would say a decent problem solver. And I started reading and learning things and, came across some individuals that were big proponents of pretty intense strength training for pain management. And that's when I started really taking lower body training a little bit more seriously as well, because I had the bro mentality of like, I lift for my upper body and basketball is my lower body workout, right? But that's when I started doing full range of motion squats with slow eccentrics, pausing at the bottom, doing some Bulgarian split squats and really focusing on technique. And dude, my knees couldn't feel better. Like I feel amazing, right? And sometimes I say that to people and they're like, well, isn't the lifting like super deeply? Like, isn't that bad? Anyways, the question that I wanted to ask is like, what are some of the most common misconceptions that you come across when it comes to pain and movement? And how do you address them?
The largest misconception is that everybody agrees about what pain is.
I love that.
And so the first thing that we need to be able to do if we're going to solve for something is define it.
Mhm.
Right? Hey, we have a financial deficit this month. Well, what's a deficit? Everybody
Sure.
knows what that means, right? And in business, it's easy. Like business is the easiest analogy to this. If I said, "Hey, we're really profitable, but last month we lost $20,000," you're like, "How are you profitable and losing money?" Well, because profit doesn't account for things like taxes, depreciation, interest on other things, loans, all of this. So we have to be able to define terms and have
Sure.
everyone understand them. So what I tell people all the time is that pain is nothing more than the negative emotional interpretation to irritation. Irritation is just the conscious intake of stimulus. So now think about it this way. You felt something, whatever you felt. You then make a decision. Was that good or was that bad? If the decision was bad, that's pain. If the decision was good, that might be pleasure.
Mhm.
So now what's important to understand is that irritation drives adaptation. So what that means is if we're feeling something and we're not clear on whether we like it or not, but we felt it. And so we're like, I don't think I should be feeling anything when I do this. So we then decide, okay, I don't like it. I haven't made a conscious decision. It's just boom, felt it, don't like it. And then we stop doing it. Well, that can lead to the adaptation that we want to happen not happening. Do you follow that?
Yeah.
So we give people release, and injury, by the way, is just the decision to stop or not to start. It's like when your coach asks you, hurt or you injured? What coach is really asking is, am I taking you out or are you getting up and playing? Injury, good.
I would say, how do you differentiate though between that terminology for injury and like breaking a bone in half?
Well, if you break a bone in half, the decision's been made for you. You're going to stop doing certain things or you're not going to be able
Sure.
to start them.
So the decision isn't always under control or under your control, I'll
No,
say.
certainly
Yeah,
not.
sure.
And I like to tell people all the time, even if you broke your leg, you don't have a leg injury. You have an injury to all of the activities that you would need that leg to perform in order for you to do them.
Yeah.
Because like a great example of this is I had a guy come into my office one time and he was really stressed about his back pain. I'm like, why are you like, I haven't seen somebody so stressed about back pain that's so mild.
Mhm.
He's like, look, my daughter's getting married in 8 weeks. And I've been looking forward to dancing with her at her wedding since the day that she was born.
Mm.
And right now I can't dance because I have this back injury. I was like, okay. You can't dance at all? And he's like, well, I can't dance the way I want to dance. I said, well, how can you dance? And he's like, much more moderately, like much more reserved. I said, well, could you dance the way that you want to dance at all or not at all? Like for 5 seconds? He's like, I could probably do it for 30 seconds. I said, great. He's like, what's great about that? I said, well, think about it for a second here. We just went from I can't dance because of this back injury to I can dance, but not the way I want to all the time. I can only do that for 30 seconds. Well, what that tells me is you have a stamina issue, not a back injury. You have a dancing stamina issue. So we need to figure out where you need to add stamina and you'll be able to dance. It won't be a problem. Exactly how you want to. And he did. And just understanding that, by the way, reduced his stress in such a way that it reduced his pain. So it's important that we understand the words we use are really important. And the number one mistake, the biggest misnomer that's out there is that we all think that we agree on what the word pain means. We don't.
Mhm.
The next one is people are told if it hurts, don't do it. And again, we haven't agreed about what it means to hurt. Hurt, pain, synonymous, right? So we have to have an agreement about that. We have to set parameters around that so that people can make intentional, logical decisions instead of emotionally charged ones out of fear. There is nothing that you have ever done in your life, Joey, or that I've ever done in mine, that we are proud of that did not happen on the other side of some pain.
Sure.
So what would be different about our bodies? If we're in a situation where we're losing money in our businesses, we don't just close our businesses, we figure out why.
Sure.
If our relationships are on the fritz, we don't just end the relationships because they're uncomfortable, we figure out why.
Yep.
Why is it different with our body? Why do we decide, oh, that hurts, I'm just going to not do it. I'll just stay away from it for the rest of my life. So I'll give you some really simple guideposts that we give to all of our clients that will help people drop their shoulders a little bit, relax, and start to live more freely. On a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being childbirth or passing a kidney stone, is your discomfort a 5 or less or a 6 or more?
Mm-hmm.
If it's a 5 or less, you're probably okay to keep going.
Mm-hmm.
When you do whatever you're doing, does it get better, worse, or stay the same? If it's staying the same or getting better, you're okay. It might even be therapeutic. Keep going.
Mm-hmm.
So 5 or less, staying the same or getting better, keep going. Number 3, if when you stop doing whatever it is that you were doing, does the intensity of the discomfort that went up, does it go away? So your shoulder hurts when you're pressing a weight, but it's like a 4 and it stays a 4. When you put the weight down, there's no discomfort at all, or it goes down to a 2. Good. Good. If I stabbed you in the shoulder, it would still hurt when I pulled the knife out. And finally, 24 to 48 hours later, do you still feel like you were in the set that was causing the discomfort the day before?
Mm-hmm.
If the answer to that is no, if you don't have that same acute focal discomfort, good. You just did something that was probably therapeutic. Now, none of that is medical advice. Like I said, we're not a medical company. I just want to give people guideposts that
Sure.
they can follow to more freely do things that formerly they felt like they were restricted from.
Yeah. Some really great things that I'm picking up from you. One, I think you would agree that a lot of your philosophy is around helping people reframe how they perceive their limitations, right? Like this guy that couldn't dance. Hey, it's not necessarily an issue with this injury that you're having. It's an issue of stamina, right? And if we can work on the stamina, you can improve. And I think reframing is so powerful because it helps people understand that like this big insurmountable thing they thought they couldn't get over is not actually that big and scary, right?
Yes.
The second thing I'm really picking up on that I couldn't agree more with is the analogy or the similarities between physical and emotional pain, right? Because if you define pain, and as you mentioned, it's a difficult thing to define, but I would assume that all definitions apply to emotional pain as well, right? It's uncomfortable. It hurts, whatever hurt means. It makes you want to go away from it naturally, right? And yeah, you wouldn't tell somebody like, hey, your business, you're going through a rough time right now. Like, stop doing that. You shouldn't do that. That is such stupid advice. Yet that's very common in the physical space.
Well, the International Association for the Study of Pain says that there is no such thing as pain without emotion. So,
I mean, that's like objectively a simple concept to understand, but I've never thought of it that way.
No one does. And so when you go to the doctor and you tell them my knee hurts, they don't ask, how is this affecting your life? Often they fix the knee. And let me give you an even more obvious, common, and mind-blowingly ridiculous situation. I have to caveat this with most of the time because some physical therapists out there is going to be like, not me, great, but most others. Okay? You go to the physical therapist with shoulder pain, or better yet, with Achilles pain. And you tell the physical therapist, my left Achilles is hurting. It really hurts whenever I walk. It feels inflamed. My foot feels weak, all of this stuff. They evaluate your Achilles. They're like, yep, you're right, Joey. Your left Achilles is inflamed and your calf is weak as a result, but it's protective. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to reduce the inflammation with some affleurage. We're going to do some dry needling. And then we're going to put you through some heavy, slow resistance on that left side so that we can really improve the strength of that tendon to make it less likely this happens over time. In the meantime, I want you to stop running. No problem. I can do that. Does this sound familiar?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. 6 weeks later, 8 weeks later, you're like, oh my God, the physical therapist was a godsend. This was amazing. I feel so much better. 4 months later, your Achilles hurts again. And you're like, what is going on? I just have this bad Achilles. Well, what if your left Achilles was actually stronger and more flexible than your right Achilles? And so every time that you went on a run, you did 60% of the work on your left and 40% of the work on your right. And you developed an overuse injury on your left. Then you rested to reduce the inflammation, went to physical therapy, who made the left side even stronger, which now changed your deficit from 60-40 to 65-35. And I'm using oversimplified terms.
Sure.
And then you went out running again, and your symptoms are back, and now you're led to believe that you just have this thing that you can't solve for.
Yeah.
It was your right side the whole time.
Sure.
But our medical system isn't set up to solve for that. And our fitness industry, it's not taught that that's what you're supposed to do.
Yeah. Well, thankfully there are obviously services like yours that can help identify these issues as well. You brought up that idea or that concept that you just brought up is something I have experienced very intimately. When I mentioned that I stopped playing so much basketball, started doing some more heavy resistance training, I got really deep into powerlifting.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, barbell movements were king. And this will tie into the next question I want to ask as well. And for years, the main and practically only movement I would do for my glutes and quads were barbell back squats, right? Which I think for some people's anatomy fits them perfectly. For me, I wouldn't say it didn't fit me perfectly, but over time I started to develop a lot of shifting towards my left side. And this was not something I noticed at first. Mm-hmm. But after some time, I was developing really bad knee and hip pain on my left side specifically. Mm-hmm. And then I started learning a little bit about the importance of doing unilateral movements, training each limb individually. One of my legs is probably an inch or so longer than the other one, so it makes sense that I would put more load on one side. And the funny thing was that although my left side was the one that was in pain, I could do a 90-degree sit to stand on one leg on my left leg. I could not do it on my right leg. Mm-hmm. My right leg was so weak because anytime I would get near failure, I would just completely shift to the left and just really use my left leg. And then I always wondered, why is my squat so weak compared to all these people? I train really hard. I train really frequently. Well, no shit. I'm not using my body. My right side's not really working much, right? And then I started incorporating some of the single leg stuff, and I've been able to improve a ton. I don't have that left knee pain anymore. And my question is, how much of pain or injury, for lack of a better term, is caused by improper execution of exercise? Because this is something I experience a lot too, Sean, where people are like, I can't do that movement. I've done that movement and I hurt myself every time. Maybe you're just not doing it correctly.
It's hard to quantify the answer to a question like that. What's easier, I think, to do for people is to break it down, how to figure out if that's the case for them.
Okay. So,
and I have a great story that I think you as a PhD will simultaneously really like and really dislike. Don't
piss me off, dude.
I'm not going to piss you off. The story comes second. We have a hierarchy that we put people through physically when it comes to what is causing your problem. Okay. At the base of the hierarchy is work and recovery. Mm-hmm. So are you just overtrained and under-recovered? Start there. I don't care how out of balance your left and your right, or your upper and your lower, or your this sling versus that sling is. If you are overworking your recovery, you're screwed. So start there. Let's say that that's good. Now let's evaluate your flexibility, your passive range of motion on one side versus the other in the same activity, the same joint range. Are they full and are they similar? Great. Let's say that they are. We move up to what we say is mobility, which is your active range of motion. Are they the same? Do you have the requisite ranges of motion to perform the activities that are causing you discomfort? Or are you never having tested them and then finding yourself in pain because you don't actually have the range of motion that you need to do the thing? I used to see this all the time when I would go to gyms and see people with shoulder pain. I would lay them on their back and be like, bring your arm over your head with your elbow straight and try to touch your finger to the floor. They couldn't get there. And they were like, I get neck, shoulder, and upper back pain whenever I do kipping pull-ups. I'm like, of course you do. What are you talking about? Like, what is confusing about this for you? You don't have the range of motion. And then to the contrary of that, there was a woman, I think her name was Kathy, might have been Karen, at the same seminar where I met Nick, who I was talking to you about earlier.
Mm-hmm.
And she had been doing all of the flexibility exercises in the world to fix her shoulder pain and nothing was working. Laid her down, shoulder range of motion was like butter, like a hot knife through butter, full range of motion. Like then we had her stand up and do them actively and she couldn't do it.
Mm-hmm.
Like you are not lacking flexibility. You're lacking strength and end range, motor control,
Mm-hmm.
your ability to get through full range of motion. So great. Base, work to recovery. Next level up, flexibility, passive range of motion. Next level up, mobility, active range of motion. Next level up is strength and strength balance. So what you were just describing, are you doing 80% of your work on one side and 20% on the other? I'm exaggerating, but
Yeah.
if you're doing that and you're performing bilateral exercises, it's reasonable that you would end up in discomfort, right? Then last, and that, by the way, that we go deep on that one because it's not only left versus right, it's directional,
Rotational.
it's strength versus stamina, it's all of the things.
Yeah.
And then at the top of the pyramid, where most people start, and they should be finishing there, is skill. So you see someone tells a coach, it hurts my knee when I do it like this. The first thing the coach typically does is, let's try changing your the way you do that. Let's try this cue.
Yeah.
Like, dude, you're addressing a skill problem, and you might be right, but it could be something below that. And this is when I love to get into debates with coaches about assessments and the value or lack thereof. I'm like, you're waiting for something to go wrong to try and figure out what it was. I'm working to predict what might go wrong to try and solve for it before it happens. And then two, obviously I can use the same assessments as a detective tool. Now let me tell you the story, because you were talking about squatting on a single leg. We were working with a gym at the time, and to make a long story short, what they ended up doing following some of our guidelines was they tested every athlete in the gym. It was a CrossFit gym. They're like 400 members. And they tested all of them on their 10 rep back squat. Then they gave them off. Then they said, okay, let's do it again. Now what we're going to do is test you on your ability to do a step up on a single leg with half of the weight that you just back squatted for 10 to the same hip angle that you back squatted. Right?
Okay.
So the box is above kneecap height.
Mm-hmm.
So then it was okay. If your left leg, if you were able to do fewer step ups than you were able to do squat by 20% or more, you're in the step up group. If you were able to do 20% less step ups on your left or your right than the other side, regardless of how many you did in total, you're in the step up group. If you don't fit those criteria, you're in the squat group. Over the next 8 weeks, I think it was 8 weeks, they had their members in the gym either doing step-ups or squats based on the group that they were assigned to every time that they were squatting in the program. Same kind of linear progression, just one was on single leg, one was on two leg. At the end of the program, the group who was on single leg improved their 10 rep max squat by like 9.3%.
Okay.
Their bilateral squat.
Mm-hmm.
The group who was in the bilateral squat group improved by about 3%. That doesn't mean unilateral squats are better for improving your squat than bilateral squats. It doesn't mean it was a perfect study. What it means is that if your left leg is off from your right leg by a significant margin, or your single leg is off from your bilateral leg by a significant margin, it probably makes sense that you would focus on the single leg stuff more than the bilateral leg stuff. I had people come at me for posting that in ways you would not believe.
Why?
Because they said, I said one of our clients ran a study in their gym. And that set people off. That's not a study. All the way to the point that there was a podcast at the time, I won't name them, who asked me to come on. They asked me to come on to defend my position that they disagreed with. I was like, sure. So I started listening to their podcast just to see what's their podcast like. And there were 3 guys, all of them very intelligent. And what they used to do when they didn't agree with somebody was they would basically come really well prepared with gotchas. And I knew that was going to happen. So when we got ready to record, I said, before we start, I just have a question for you guys. Do any of you guys shower? And they were like, yeah. What do you mean? I'm like, well, I'm just curious why you shower. And they're like, well, hygiene.
Mm-hmm.
I said, okay. So there's evidence that that showering is good for your hygiene. Yeah. Yes, of course there is. I said, and of course you have it with your shower in particular, and with your soap, and with your showering method. Because if you didn't have it, then obviously there's no real empirical evidence that you taking a shower is doing anything beneficial for your health. And they're like, well, it's pretty obvious that it's working. I'm like, oh, got it. As long as we can agree that if it's pretty obvious it's working is a good enough criteria, I'm ready to start. Needless to say, they canceled the podcast.
That's hilarious. Yeah. I'm obviously an academic by training, and I do like getting into the nuances of research because I think it plays a role. I also don't like when people make it the Bible, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, it's either this way or no way, because there is so much we can learn from experience and anecdote as well. And yes, maybe anecdote is not a well-designed clinical study, because it's not, but that doesn't mean there's no value to it, right?
Well, what's interesting is I agree with you. I think that there's a lot, like the merits of empirical data are what allow us to standardize things for the masses without worrying that we're going to hurt the masses, that we might actually benefit the masses. It's essential. It's an essential tool both for validation and for testing theory, which I guess is validation also, right? What's really interesting is I think it was about a year and a half, maybe 2 years ago now, the NFL ran a study that did have empirical data to figure out why are so many athletes tearing their hamstrings. And what they found was that the number one indicator of hamstring injuries amongst the athletes they tested was a significant difference in strength on a single leg from one side to the other.
Interesting.
I'm like, where were you guys when the world was in my Instagram comment section a few years ago?
Yeah. So let me ask you a question then. Let me correct me if I'm interpreting this incorrectly.
Sure.
The individuals that stayed in the squat group were essentially people that performed relatively equally well in the squat and the single leg.
Yep.
Meaning that there wasn't a massive difference between their strength on left and right sides. Correct?
Right.
So it's not that the single leg movement is inherently 3 times better for getting stronger at squats than a squat is.
That's right.
It's that the people that were doing the single leg stuff, one of their legs was so weak that by focusing on it, they skyrocketed their progress, essentially.
That's right.
Right? So if that person was equally strong, they would probably see a smaller improvement in their squat, simply because progress is slow. But if you have some sort of deficiency, you can do corrective exercises to increase the rate of progress, essentially.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's the concept of looking for the lowest hanging fruit.
Yeah.
Because the way that if we wanted to really keep studying these people, once they got to equal, we would have them continue doing single leg stuff and see if they continued to improve their squat at the same rate. And anecdotally, we know from our experience with over 10,000 people, that doesn't happen.
Yeah.
It doesn't continue. But at the same time, people like Mike Boyle talk all the time about the people who like exercises like the squat as something that athletes should do to get better at sport are generally people who look pretty squatty.
Yes.
Right? Could you teach a 6'8" basketball player how to squat? Sure. Are his lever lengths built to be a squatter?
No.
No. And is it the only way that we can prep them for his sport? No.
Yeah.
So sometimes
and I'm saying this. Yeah, I'm saying this from experience because I'm the lanky 6'5" dude, right? And I'm going to ask you some questions here selfishly, and we can go through these relatively quickly. It's because I love powerlifting.
Mm-hmm.
I love, you're going to laugh at this. The reason why I like barbell squats is because I think visually they look really cool.
Really?
Right? Like I see somebody squat, I'm like, damn, that looks cool. I want to take some videos to post on Instagram. I want to show myself doing a squat, not a fucking leg press or a
Mm-hmm.
Bulgarian split squat, because the squat looks cool. But inherently, every time I go back to the barbell squat, I substantially slow down my rate of progress
Mm-hmm.
because it's just not a movement that feels extremely comfortable for me.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not a movement that I get really strong at. So for example, just about 3 months ago, I started barbell squatting again. And it's the same thing as always, man. Like I progress a lot quicker on other movements and I just stall on the barbell back squat. And even though I don't have any discomfort, honestly, no discomfort at all when I squat, I do still realize that I do have some rotation, not even just shifting, but particularly my right elbow, I can crank a lot more under me and my left elbow, I don't. So I create some torque, right? And that perhaps limits my performance. My question to you is, would you encourage me, and I know the answer to this, would you encourage me to start with some single leg movements instead of focusing so much on the squat?
I don't think you do know the answer because there is an it depends here.
Okay.
And the it depends is I don't know what your goals are. I don't know what you train for. And so
Getting jacked.
just get fucking jacked. So one of the things I like to say is that excellence indicates deficiency.
Okay.
So if you're excellent at something, you're deficient at something else because you spent too much time
Yeah.
getting excellent at one thing to possibly not have a hole somewhere else.
Sure.
So when you're just trying to get jacked, you can do leg extensions and hamstring curls and probably get jacked faster than back squatting.
Yeah.
You could deadlift for your big CNS load, and you could do your isolated single joint concentrics, eccentrics, and isometrics and get jacked.
Yeah.
You don't necessarily need the squat for that. And I say, like, I have very low standards for strength inside of a gym environment compared to a lot of other people who think that I'm crazy and an apologist for weak people. And the reason that I have that is because when I'm looking at real functionality, like, how is this really going to help you live the life that you intend to live outside of the gym? If we remove elite athletics from that, what is the value in squatting more than your body weight on a barbell?
It's just cool. A hobby.
Sure. And I'm all for that. I'm
Yeah.
all for it. As long as we understand we're doing it because we think it's cool.
Yeah.
Because the argument that I get from people all the time is stuff like, well, the carryover. I'm like, well, so is that the only way we can get carryover? What exactly what carryover are you talking about? Can you break down the science? So can I get that from sprinting? Oh, I can? Oh, okay, great. So can I sprint instead of it all ends up breaking down. And my favorite argument is things like, well, you have to sit on the toilet, like not with a fucking barbell. Right. So, and not to that depth. And so to me, it's when I'm able to do something without any cognition, I don't have to think about the skill of doing this. I can just do it. I believe I am now doing that thing because I enjoy that thing, not because that thing is serving my physical advancement.
Sure.
That's my
Sure. Well, you asked me what my goal is, and yes, I want to build muscle, but realistically, even from you explaining the main findings of this particular study, like I would like to be able to optimize my progress when it comes to strength specific, right? Because I like it. Like I would like to be able to squat more, and maybe objectively, my path to squatting more isn't by squatting more. If that
it might
makes
not
sense.
be. And look, when I was how old was I? It was 2000. It was Christmas 2013. So who cares? Nobody listening cares how old you were. I was 30. I back squatted double my body weight.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, great, 300 pounds, we're good. Like we don't need to go any higher than that ever in my life. So I never did. But I chased it. I used to squat so heavy for me, so often for me, that I got myself sick. And my coach was like, this is when you're supposed to do steroids. I'm like, I'm not doing steroids. It's like, then you're going to need to deload. It's going to take you longer. That's fine. I'm 30. I'm not who am I taking steroids for?
Yeah.
But so the point I'm making there is like, I get it.
Yeah.
I get the chase. It's fun.
It's fun.
It's ego. It's challenge. It's conquering something difficult. It's all of those things. And there is value to that beyond the gym.
Yeah.
But we have a very lazy way of putting things on a pedestal as this is what's important. And it's often not. So the answer to your question, besides it depends, is we would need to put you through a full evaluation to figure out what's A, causing the spin or the rotation. B, is the fastest way to get you jacked. C, is the least amount of exposure to injury that you can possibly have while still taking the chances that you want to take to push the margins of your performance so that you can look a certain way, film a certain way, perform a certain way, and chase a certain way.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And if I were to ask you this follow-up question, what is your perspective on exercises like a hack squat or a leg press that prevent you from shifting more towards one side or rotating, right? Because one thing I realized, like when I do a hack squat in that fixed plane, both my legs receive an equal pump. I'm pushing equally difficult on both legs. What's your general take on machine-based movements?
I think there's two questions there. I think you're probably mistaken about what you're feeling as compared to what's actually happening. And I would be curious if you put a force plate underneath your feet and you pressed.
Okay.
So that's part A.
Okay.
Part B is machine-based movements are fine for people who need machine-based movements.
Sure. Of
You know,
course.
like, look, I'm 41 years old right now. My priority is being able to say yes to anything I want to do in my life. And by the way, that includes sparring with somebody at a Muay Thai gym. That includes wrestling with my daughter's boyfriends in 7-8 years. So I'm not here to be weak, right?
Yeah.
I'm here to be strong, to be vibrant, and to be healthy. And for me, the only machines I use are cardio machines. I use a ski erg. I use a treadmill, a self-powered treadmill. I'll use a Concept 2 bike. Other than that, the closest thing I use to a machine is a cable.
Interesting. Just because there's not much carryover for your particular goals.
Yeah, I'm more interested in being able to do things many times than once or twice. I'll go heavy once a week.
Okay.
And that's really for the neurological overload that I'm looking for.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's more to spike more motor units.
Yeah.
Things of that nature than it is to actually build power. I have no idea what my PRs are anymore. I just don't it's not important to me. And there was a time when it was.
Yeah.
There was a time when you could see, you could basically put me in front of a classroom naked and take an anatomy test.
Yeah.
I'm not there anymore because I don't care enough to make the sacrifices and the compromises in my life that it requires to be there.
Yeah. Another very important topic that we could do a whole podcast episode on, honestly. It's funny because it's kind of a joke, not a joke, but I used to be the same way where I knew my PR on every single lift, not just my 1RM, but my 5RM, my 10RM on everything, always chasing strength. And like I said, I still care about those things. I care much more about feeling good and moving well now than I used to.
Mm-hmm.
Before it was this hurts. I don't care. I have to do a 5-rep max squat today. This is what I'm doing. Right?
Been there.
And I think to myself, and the mature side of me says, oh, it's because I've matured in my fitness journey. My priorities have changed. I don't care about these things as much. And the gym bro inside of me just says, you're a weak little bitch.
Yeah, stop like that. Talk about. 100%.
So I'm always battling between these two where when I spend more time doing training that makes me feel good, and I'm like, fuck, should I chase the PRs again? And then I start chasing the PRs and I'm like, I don't really enjoy this that much. And I'm always in a constant flux between those two. But at the end of the day, I stay active and I keep training, which is what's most important.
Well, you're also playing a game with yourself. You're having fun.
Yeah, exactly.
The thing I tell people all the time is the best program in the world is the one that somebody will do consistently. And so if you need to push some margins because it keeps you excited, then your program should have you pushing some margins to keep you excited.
Yeah.
Period. I think one of the things that made me successful working with athletes when other people weren't with the same athlete was that I played the head game with them without them even knowing I played the head game with them. So I would give them things that I knew they were going to do really well at and tell them, if you struggle with this, that's fine. Like, I expect you to. And then they would kill it and be like, dude, I smashed that workout. I'm like, no way. I knew they were going to. But you have to be able to play that mental game with that athlete.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I love that. That's a funny, that goes into the skill of coaching, right? And that's why coaching is just as much science as it is art, really. And experience is so important there. It's funny, man, when I started this whole coaching thing, being naive and being inexperienced, I was like, I'm really educated. I have a lot of information. I'm going to be able to help a lot of people. And partially true, like some people do benefit from more information because a lot of times people, like, especially in the nutrition space, fall for a lot of BS, right? But then I started to realize how much of coaching is not the information. It's probably the vast majority of coaching is not the information. And the information is just like the small piece to get the person started.
Well, I can speak to that in a way that I think docs probably won't like very much, but it's true. When I was working with athletes at the CrossFit Games in 2017, I think between my business partner at the time and me, we had like 40 athletes we were working. Our Airbnb was like a walk-in clinic. I think of the 40 people I put my hands on intra-competition, one of them was legit.
What do you mean?
There were 40 athletes or so that we were working with.
Okay.
And they would come to me in between events and be like, this feels tight.
Okay.
And I would do something with my hands. And I would then ask them, like, does that feel better? Oh, yeah, so much better. I'm like, great. This was like, you had this little thing and now you're good now. And the reality is, of the 40, there was one, George Sanchez, who came back from a running event and had pain in both of his calves that wasn't cramping. And he had genuine glide issues with his sciatic nerve at his hip that I was able to help him correct. Of everybody else, it was them thinking that me putting my hands on them was making them better day up.
Yeah. Yeah, so much of it is placebo for sure.
Yeah, and so that's the same with a strength program sometimes.
Yeah, this is tangential but similar in terms of what we're talking about, coaching being so much more than just information. As you know, we just had our second baby. We had our daughter. Before this, we were going to my wife's doctor's appointments. And during our first pregnancy, we were in the hospital for 10 days because my wife had blood pressure complications and her blood pressure wasn't coming down. And then that turned into some panic attacks, and the panic attacks were spiking her blood pressure. And you can see how in a situation like that, the language that a doctor uses could be very important.
Yep.
Right? And this is tangential or synonymous to coaching because, like, how do you relate to a person? How do you speak to a person? How do you motivate a person? How do you help a person stay accountable versus just telling them, hey, eat this much food and that's it, right? And so my wife had some really great doctors who were very understanding and supportive and helped her feel like she wasn't alone and it's normal. And that really helped regulate her blood pressure and make her feel better. And then we had other doctors that were just brain dead doctors that understood the physiology, did not understand how to speak to a person. And we had a doctor literally like the day we were supposed to leave, and we didn't leave partially because of this. Like, it freaked my wife out. And he was like, well, I can't let you leave because if you leave like this, you might have a stroke and die. It's
good.
Dude, you don't say that to somebody who's having a panic attack. Like, is that factually true? Yes, that is factually true. You do not deliver it that way, right? And so it's like, docs could also benefit from a little bit of the personal touch as well.
Well, that goes, one of the things that we tell our clients at Active Life is you are not done until you've had a setback and recovered. And the reason why that's true is because the difference between somebody being resilient and somebody compromising on the way that they live their life for the rest of their life because of pain is how you interpret a setback. If you think a setback means you're back at ground zero and the problems are there and nothing ever got any better and this is how it's going to be for the rest of your life, it is. If you're advised ahead of time along the way, you are going to have a setback. That setback is going to be painful. That setback is going to have you feeling like you're back at square one. That setback is going to be extremely frustrating, both mentally and emotionally. And that setback is essential. So while I'm not going to do anything to intentionally set it off, when it happens, and inevitably it will, we're going to celebrate.
I love that.
And that changes everything for the person when they have that setback.
Yeah.
They call excited, which is crazy. It's like, hey,
Yeah.
my back hurts again. It's like, amazing.
Yeah.
Let's figure out why and build the durability that we missed. That's what the setback is. We missed something. Now we can find it. This is amazing.
Yeah.
So if I'm a doc and your wife has panic attacks and high blood pressure, I'm telling her this is something that is not normal, but it is common.
Mm-hmm.
And the way that we get something like this under control is by understanding what causes it, what relieves it, and what we do if it sticks around. Mm-hmm. So that you don't exacerbate it by worrying about something that is not at all worth worrying.
Yeah. Yeah, you don't tell her she's going to die.
No. Hey, if you cross that street, you might die.
Yeah.
True. So if I wait for the light, though, I'm probably good if all the cars are stopped. Yeah.
Yeah. You know, it's the concept of the mindset piece, and the mindset piece is so important. And it's what you're describing is having a growth mindset, right? It's like seeing obstacles as an opportunity to learn and grow, because that's really what they are. Mm-hmm. We talk about this to our clients a lot from a weight loss perspective, right? Because we know that, I don't know if you know this statistic, Sean, like we don't have a weight loss problem. People lose weight. The issue is keeping it off. People regain weight, right? Mm-hmm. I think like 90% of people who attempt weight loss actually lose a significant amount of weight at some point in their lifetime. They just don't keep it off. And obviously, inevitably, we experience this with clients as well. People lose motivation. They have setbacks in their life. Life gets stressful. So they might have lost 30, 40, 50 pounds. Then they regain 5 to 10. And some people like get set off by that and just go way back to their beginning habits. And it's like, hey, like you experience a setback. Let's actually talk about what's going on in your life at the moment. And let's talk about how to make our plan more bulletproof, how to improve your lifestyle-related habits so you can deal through these situations in a positive way. It's pretty much the exact same thing you're talking about from an injury perspective.
Well, it is. And what you're describing there is the personal development that people don't know they're signing up for.
Yes. Yes.
It's the idea that in order to be the person who doesn't have the pain, or in your case, the person who doesn't have the weight that you once had, you have to become the person who never would have had it in the first place.
Correct.
And that's why we get into things like, who are your friends?
Yeah.
Because I imagine a very high cause for people regaining their weight is a spouse who is not supportive of the new lifestyle that they're trying to live.
I'm sure.
And so, okay, well, who's around you? How do we help you influence that person so that they can support you by accident?
Yeah.
And it's the same with people who are dealing with aches and pains. It's, oh, come on, man. You haven't been in pain for 2 weeks. Just come play. It's like, well, I was drinking on a cliff top and I slipped and somebody caught me before I fell to my, proverbial lifestyle death, pilled me up, put me back on that cliff top. I'm still blindfolded and I still have a drink in my hand. I'm not sure I should start dancing yet again.
Yeah.
Or maybe get the blindfold off and the drink out of my hand. And that's what people do. And it's peer pressure is real and people don't always mean to do it.
Yeah.
I think people generally have your best interests in mind. They're just often misguided as to how to manifest those best interests in a real way.
Yeah. I feel like people have maybe no idea almost how much their environment influences their outcomes, right? Because especially with us, like people are like, oh, I know I need to eat a little bit healthier. I know I need to exercise a little bit more. It's like, yes, objectively, yeah, you do need to do that. But what's preventing you from doing that now?
That's right.
It's really like the lifestyle stuff, right? And with our clients, we put a lot of emphasis on our community because we've seen how beneficial that is for people, man. Like, dude, oftentimes, I would say the majority of times, people who are in a really unhealthy position physically don't have any support systems in real life. Not when it comes to their health, not when it comes to their nutrition, right? And simply like being part of a group where like somebody shares a healthy recipe or somebody says like, hey, I got my steps in today. I feel good. Like, it's the most basic thing, but it helps so much with accountability, with guidance. It helps so much with shifting their identity as well, right? We do these group coaching calls. We always start off with by just sharing some wins, no matter how small. It's like, hey, I got all my steps in that week. That's a small win, but like I've seen how powerful that has been just for long-term consistency with clients. So I love that you even brought up the concept of like, what are your friends? What's your environment? Because those things really do matter a ton.
I love small questions that open up big conversations.
Mm-hmm.
And so a small question I like to ask to somebody is something along the lines of, what are you excited about right now?
You were telling me this when we were talking earlier as well, in terms of like fun interview questions too.
Yeah, because if I ask somebody what they're excited about and they tell me, I just learned a lot about that person.
Definitely.
So like I'll give people an example, and this is really good for social environments, but it's also good for working with clients or for being a client. Ask it of your coach. If your coach doesn't ask it of you, you take the step. Coach, ask these of your clients. If I ask you, what are you excited about? And you're like, oh, well, we just bought our second baby home. It's our first girl, and I'm really excited to have a baby all over it. I just learned you're probably in a committed relationship.
Mm-hmm.
You have 2 kids and you love being a dad. You have a boy and you have a girl, because this is your first girl and your second kid you just described. You're not sleeping extremely well right now, but you're happy to make the trade-off, right?
Yeah.
You're probably the most tender in terms of the way that you're going to be emotionally towards other people right now that you'll ever be in your life. You and your wife are going through relearning how to love each other in different roles than you were going through before. There's so much that I learn about you through one sentence.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a huge win. And for both of us. And I encourage people to be prepared to ask questions that feel like they're risk taking, because those are the questions that other people don't ask people. And so it's refreshing when you hear it. And it's something that you can absolutely inject into your training plan. If I was coaching you right now, we're not going for PRs.
I would fire you immediately.
Yeah, and you should. If I'm coaching you right now, we have a different kind of a check-in that you're doing with yourself every day before you train than we otherwise would have prior to the baby coming or in 4 to 5 months when the baby's sleeping.
Sure.
Like,
that makes sense.
These are simple things. And I'm sending you a gift because I heard you. I care about you. I want you to be happy. And that's my job. And so for anybody who does send gifts, don't put the kid's name on them. But other than that, I just want people to understand the value of better questions and substantive conversations as compared to the alternative lazy, what do you do? How you feeling today?
Yeah. Yeah, well, those are just way too open-ended in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
Sean, let's go ahead and wrap this up, man. I appreciate you a ton for taking time to be here. You and I have known each other for a relatively short period of time, but even in this short period of time, it's awesome to get to know you a little bit more. I always say selfishly that I do these podcast episodes with people to just connect with people.
Mm-hmm.
And hey, I can make some content from it, so why not, right?
Mm-hmm.
Jokes aside, thank you. I appreciate you a ton. I look forward to growing our personal relationship as well. Do you mind sharing with the audience where they can find you, social media, website, where can they go?
The easiest thing for you to do is to come and find me on Instagram at Dr. Sean Pastuch. I imagine you'll have it in the show notes, but it's
correct.
Everything that I do is linked from there. And I imagine your audience is more on Instagram than it is on LinkedIn, but that's where you'll find me.
Pretty much exclusively Instagram. For those of you guys listening, as always, the links will be down in the description. but I'll be sharing some videos and clips on Instagram as well, so you guys will be able to find Sean there. And as always, if you guys enjoyed this episode and you're a regular listener, thank you for supporting the show. All I ask is that you take a second to rate the podcast and leave a review. It really does help me a ton, and it just takes a second of your time. And I'll catch you on next week's episode.
Can I give your audience one more thing, Joey?
Yeah, of course. Go ahead.
If you are somebody who listens to this and you were like, I wonder if that guy in his company can help me, when you find me on Instagram, just tell me that. I answer all of my DMs. It's always me. It's not somebody else. And we take calls with anybody who is curious. We either help you become a client or refer you to somebody else when we're not the right fit. So it's totally risk-free.
Yeah, I love that. Awesome, brother. I hope you have a wonderful day. And again, thank you.
Thank you.